It's free. Just doing an audio check. Yeah, just checking to see if they can hear us right now. They shouldn't. All right, I think we'll get going now. Hey everyone, hopefully you'll be able to see me here. It's a bit of a delay, so gonna wait just one moment to see if it updates on the stream here in a second. Also make sure people can actually hear me now. And unfortunately, audio is always a bit more difficult than it feels like it should be on this. Sorry, one moment. Oh wow, huge delay. All right, well, you're now just getting to a point where it is 5:31 my time, but it might be a, a little bit later for you guys. I'm sorry for the there's a really large delay in the stream. And kind of sorry also for some of the audio issues. I know it's been kind of an issue for the past couple of streams. Still trying to work on it, either kind of maybe set a block of time to kind of figure this out. For some reason, it just seems to be way more difficult than it should be. Don't know what. I'll try to get better as we go along with this. I do apologize for kind of these being consistent issues. Anyways, we are here with Andrew Rubalcaba. He will be talking about going serverless with AWS Lambda. I was actually talking to him kind of here before, maybe kind of overheard a little bit of it. I'm actually really excited about this. I've actually been doing a lot with serverless, not with Lambda. With IBM, I'm actually using our platform for that, but I'm kind of really interested to see his perspective on going serverless, and then also just how it's being done with Lambda, because obviously that is a very popular way of doing serverless. With that said, we'll go ahead and do our standard Java news, and then I will hand it off to Andrew. So, once again, welcome to Kansas City Java Users Group. For our sponsors tonight, it's YRC and VMware Tanzu. And of course, Andrew, if you want to give a shout out to your company as well during yours, you're free to do that, because in many ways your company's still kind of helping you be here, or if there's anyone else you want to kind of give a shout out to, that is also fine as well. So for our Java news, sorry, I guess I was just trying to get this all put together as well just before, but probably the biggest thing is Java can officially rent a car now. It turned 25 this month. I believe it was the 18th when Java officially turned 25, or it was definitely this week. So anyways, that's really good and exciting. And here, even 25 years later, a full quarter century, Java's still going strong. There's a lot of big developments. We had, of course, a 6-month release cycle, cadence, blah. And so we actually, of course, saw a release back in March. And we're going to see another one here coming up in September. And there's a lot of really cool new features. Like we just got records with the most recent release. And hopefully that's going to continue to move into a full production feature. And we have things like Loom and a bunch of other really cool kind of language features that are going to kind of help to with the pattern matching to make it a lot less verbose and a little bit easier and cleaner to look at. So that's going to be kind of exciting that, again, 25 years on, and Java is still going good and strong. Releases, actually Spring Boot 2.3.0 was just released also, I believe, this week. Actually, I've been already experimenting a bit with it. Haven't really got 2 minutes into the 2.3.0 features, but I do know like a really big thing about it was giving me much better support when it comes to containerization and Docker. So I have actually toyed around just a little bit with it, so that's actually pretty cool. That's kind of a really an important thing for doing modern cloud native stuff. Um, Also, be sure to put like in the chat if there's any other major releases that you want to mention as well, and we'll try to make sure we get that into these notes here. Other news, I kind of need to get up to date on conferences. One thing though, particularly since many people here do Spring, is there is a conference, Spring I/O in Barcelona. Of course, it wasn't formally held in person this year, but they did do a online presentation called Spring Bridge, Spring I/O Bridge, and you can probably check that all out on YouTube. I don't know if they have it all. I think all their talks will be posted out there, but that should give you some really recent information on Spring. I'm sure they'll probably go really deep into Spring 2.3.0 on that. Unfortunately, I didn't get to check it out too much. I was kind of busy putting out some flyers on my end, but they always do a pretty great job. I've been there a couple of times in a couple of recent years, and it's a really great conference. It's kind of like a good we have Spring One platform in the fall, and then Spring I/O in the spring for doing releases like the big spring conferences. So definitely check that out if you're interested. And I'll also try to get some more information on other upcoming online conferences and information as well. And also, I need to kind of get this update as well. I know not just us, but other local meetups are still doing stuff virtually. So definitely, if you can, it does mean a lot to us organizers when you do show up to attend. That we're not just screaming into a void or kind of doing this. It kind of gives us good feedback. So definitely, if you can continue to attend meetups, please do, because like I said, that does mean a lot to us organizers. With all that said, I'll go ahead and start bringing Andrew in here. Because that's really what we're here to learn about, is talking about AWS Lambda. So Andrew, yeah, now let me, hopefully, yeah, your audio should be coming through now. Do you hear me as well?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great, awesome. Yep, and you should be
Yep.
on there. So, yeah, just kind of briefly transitioning over to you, but I'm actually going ahead and now kind of give you the steering wheel, and you're good to go. So it's going to be a few minutes delay if you're looking at the live stream right now, but I think you're go ahead and good to go, and hope you have a good presentation.
All right. Thanks, Billy. Appreciate it. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Like I said, my name is Andrew Rubalcaba. I'm based out of the DFW Metroplex area, and I'm going to be presenting on going serverless with AWS Lambda. It's a topic that I'm pretty passionate about. It definitely piques my interest. I've been reading up a lot on it. Been doing a little bit of stuff here and there with it, and just becoming more familiar with the pieces. I gave a similar talk at our user group here in Dallas sometime last year. I think it was like November or October. Um, Anyways, let's go ahead and get started. Hopefully you guys can see my slides. Uh, Going serverless with AWS Lambda. So about me, like I said, my name is Andrew Rubalcaba. I'm a Java Spring developer. I'm also on the Java Mug board here in DFW. My Twitter handle is Han_Cholos. If you guys want to tweet me, get in contact with me or something, or give me some feedback on this talk, definitely hit me up. So what does serverless mean, right? And serverless can mean many things, but I like this tweet by Kelsey Hightower because I used to do a lot of EJB back in the day, right? And so serverless because cloud native EJBs don't sound cool. But what it really is let's let's break down the traits, right? It's basically no management of server hosts or server processes are required. Auto scaling and auto provisioning are based on load, and cost is actually based on usage. And this is probably one of the biggest points, or one of the biggest selling points of just serverless in general. Is just everything is based off of the it, the pricing models around some of these technologies is really convenient and makes developing solutions pretty affordable. Performance capabilities are defined in different terms other than the host size or the count, right? So you're not counting your EC2 instances or anything like that, right? The type of service that you're using and so forth. And implicitly just comes out of box with high availability. And I also like this presentation, this quote by Paul Jefferson says, my definition of serverless also is an economic one. A serverless application is one that costs you nothing to run when nobody is using it, excluding data storage costs. All right. So AWS services that scale well in a serverless mundo. So AWS provides a bunch of building blocks that you can start putting together to create your serverless applications, right? So one of the first ones that we got to, one of the first AWS services that got released was SQS, right? Which is just a queuing service. It's a FIFO queue, first in, first out. And it's also great for various use cases, but it's a great service. One of the other ones is a simple notification service, right? So it gives you the ability to do pub sub, and then you can broadcast your events. It's a great service that they provide. Another one that's gaining kind of some popularity, Kinesis, right? So a lot of people, I know, especially in the microservices world, we use Kafka to do a lot of the communication in between all our microservices. And AWS has this offering called Kinesis, and it's very similar to Kafka. You can do streaming, you can do all kinds of cool stuff. It's very similar to Kafka. It's their offering, but it's a managed service, right? In the sense that you don't have to install it, set it up yourself. It's kind of just ready for you to plug in and use your APIs into it. Right? S3 is another real cool service. It allows you to upload files and just store all kinds of stuff. But one of the great use cases that I'm starting to see is it's really great for static websites, right? So you can actually deploy HTML, CSS, and JavaScript onto a S3 bucket and start using it, and then you can front it with something like CloudFront, and CloudFront can give you the HTTPS and the high availability with the CDN and make your website a lot faster, and then bringing it closer to your users. Right, and then one of these other services that I've started playing around with here recently that's also starting to gain some popularity is DynamoDB, right? It's a key value document database. Its API is over HTTP endpoints, and it comes with transaction support. So one of the interesting things about DynamoDB is that Amazon uses this a lot internally within their services. So I guess at some point, Jeff Bezos got tired of giving Larry Ellison all his money for the Oracle stuff, and they actually started to transition a lot of their Oracle data loads over to DynamoDB. And there's some great talks out there on DynamoDB, and then talks by a gentleman known as Rick Luhan, who does a great job of explaining how they use it at Amazon. It's a great service. And it's the one that I'll be using today for my demo as well. I'm not going to actually be using a relational database, but I'll be using DynamoDB, and I'll dive into that a little bit more here in the demo. Another great service that's also widely used for your serverless technologies is this API gateway. I wish it had a better name because it's so generic and there's all kinds of API gateways. But API gateway is a great way for you to manage all your APIs. There's two types right now. I need to update my slide, but I have the REST-based, but they also have they have what they call the RESTful API, and then they have like an HTTP API, and one of them is supposed to be a little bit more lightweight and actually a lot cheaper, more cost-effective, depending on what you're needing. And going forward, actually, Amazon recommends that you use the newer HTTP API for interacting with the API gateway. But it's a real powerful component within your serverless architectures, because you can actually use something called velocity templates, VTLs, and you can use that to directly hook in to all those other services I've just talked to, right? Like, so you can directly hook into the SQS or Kinesis and so forth. So it's definitely a great tool to have in your serverless tool belt. And then, of course, the reason we're all here, right? The new kid on the block is AWS Lambda, which is, people call it a FAS, function as a service. It's event-driven. It's basically your code running in some kind of ephemeral container, right? Underneath the covers, you deploy your code out. It's just your function, right? And it takes that, when you invoke it, loads it up into a container, and then you're able to actually make calls to it and get make requests and get responses. It also scales automatically, and one of the biggest benefits is it's pay per use, right? So it allows you to have your computing more like an actual utility, right? It's more like your electricity. Like, you're only paying for what you're using, and if there's no request coming in or it's not being used, you're not paying anything for it, right? So let's start talking about the shift over from serverless to Lambda, and that's just one distinction I do want to make, right? It's that Lambda is a component of a serverless in the serverless world, but serverless doesn't necessarily always equal Lambda, right? They're two distinct. There's always a confusion, but they're two distinct things, right? So serverless is one thing, and then AWS the Lambda is just a component of that serverless world, right? So how do we get here, right? When we first started out back in the day, right, we had these things called data centers, and if you were developing a product and you needed to increase your capacity, you had to go ahead and do a purchase order up your server. The server came in, you had to configure it, you had to then maintain that server, and then keep paying that that cost of it, the depreciation cost or sunken cost, whatever you want to call it, right? And then in about a year or two, that server was outdated. You needed to order new ones. Changes were being made. It just took, I just remember this time, before cloud computing came along, it would just take a while for things to get set up. I mean, even to get a dev environment, sometimes it would take a week, 2 weeks, depending on when operations could get to it. And then sometime along the way, Amazon came out with EC2, and EC2 definitely changed the game, right? All of a sudden, you could get access to this elastic computing at scale at an affordable rate, and it just changed. EC2 was really something that changed the game, right? And it allowed you to use the economy of scale to bring down your cost for your computing capabilities and so forth, right? And then from there, we start migrating over, right? We go one step up, and we go over to what I would call like your Docker, your containers, or your PaaS, right? A level of abstraction up, right? And I happen to be one of those people that was very early on. I was bullish on the platform as a service offerings, right? Like something like Cloud Foundry or Heroku. I really thought those technologies would take off a lot more than what they have. And what we've seen is more and more is people are just using things like Docker and Kubernetes to kind of just build their own platforms as a service, right? They build out these containers, and then they use Kubernetes to kind of manage and the scheduling and doing all that stuff, the moving around of those containers for you. And then for Docker, then we get over to another abstraction up, right? And so all this basically is just a progression of abstractions, right? The abstraction keeps going up, right? And we're up to the Lambda point, right? It's just your code running, and it's just you're deploying a function. So what are some use cases for something like AWS Lambda, right? Well, it's great for serverless web applications. I remember when it first came out, I remember sitting around and thinking, well, I know that you can do static, you could upload, what I talked about earlier, the S3 with the static the static website hosting, right? And I started to think that I was like, man, I wonder if you could like deploy some kind of SPA type of application onto S3, and then maybe have it call lambdas and so forth. And then later on, I was watching a reInvent talk, and the folks over at Capital One had gone through that exercise where they had taken one of their um, applications and migrated it over into using S3 to host their Angular application, but they were using for their computing, they were actually using AWS Lambda for that, and it worked out great. You can also use it for IoT applications. You can use it for Alexa, chatbots, autonomous IT processing, and data processing, and so forth. So you have several use cases that you can use um, AWS Lambda for. Right. And one thing that I want to talk about real quick before we start getting into some of the other things is, one of the things I'll talk about here is the pricing. Out of the box, you get 1 million free requests per month. So I've been playing around with AWS Lambda and just doing experimentation stuff with it on the side, and I've yet to be billed for it. Right. I haven't got a single bill for any of the computing costs that I've done. Of course, I'm not doing over 1 million requests, but I'm still hitting them pretty hard, and I haven't paid a certain thing. Contrast that with I was playing around with some EC2 stuff, and I'm sure it's happened to some of you, but I left some EC2 instances on, and then about a month later, I got my bill, and it said I owed $80, and I was like, wait, what? Like, what happened? Like, what do you mean I owe $80? And then sure enough, I went and looked at my bill, and I realized that I had left an EC2 instance on somewhere, and yeah, I got billed the $80 for it. Right? You also the actual cost though is like 20 cents per 1 million requests after that, or it's based on duration and the amount of memory that you're using. I'll talk a little bit more about this, but when it comes to lambdas, there's these knobs that you can twist and turn, right? And one of them is being the memory. You can increase the memory, but based on that memory increase, you then pay per 100 milliseconds of that processing time. So it can be kind of tricky, but they actually have some calculators online how you can calculate your costs and kind of more or less try to figure out and predict what your computing cost is going to be. But one of the things that I do want to say about pricing is that I was listening to one of the talks, trying to remember the gentleman's name. I know his first name is Peter. I can't say his last name, but he's one of the authors of the serverless architecture book for Manning. And he works for A Cloud Guru. And for the longest time, he said that they had not paid a single dollar for their actual compute costs. Now they paid costs for storage costs, right, or using the other services such as the SQS, Kinesis, and so forth. But as far as computing costs, they hadn't paid a single thing. And I thought that was pretty interesting because A Cloud Guru is a pretty widely used website. All right, so why would we want to use AWS Lambda, right? So again, I just talked about it, the pricing, right? Pricing's something that I think it makes it worth. The other one is the speed to market. You're just a lot faster in your ability to get your products out to market. I went to one of the user groups here about a year or 2 years ago in Dallas in DFW, and GameStop was doing a talk on their experience of using AWS Lambda. And one of the main things that they liked about it was that the fact that they could take an idea from conceptualization out to the market like super fast compared to doing it their other way with the traditional server way and getting everything set up, getting everything configured and going through those regular channels. Their developers were able to quickly get their ideas out to market. So definitely give them speed. And then the other one is that obviously it scales automatically to your needs, right? If you need a lot of computing power, you can definitely get that. If you're not doing anything, it scales down to 0. And then I took this thing from this picture from earlier. I was on Twitter and I saw this thing, and I like what it says. It says the time being spent building serverless applications, right, on the bottom, and then on the top it says time arguing about Kubernetes features, right? Because the complexity of Kubernetes is just, it's definitely a beast, and it's that type of cognitive overload that I could definitely do without. AWS Lambda language support, right? What languages are supported, right? We get Java 11 and Java 8. We get Node.js. We get Python. I think you can do both Python 2 and 3. We have Go, .NET. And then this one's pretty interesting. You can also bring your own. So they have the concept of doing custom runtime. And I think that's a pretty interesting, that's pretty interesting because one of the things that I've seen is you start to see, and I'm sure Billy and some of the other guys that deal a lot with Spring and Spring Boot, right? You were talking about the containers and so forth. There's also, I think in the new Spring 2.3, they have a thing on Graal, and you can compile your Java code into this Graal VM. And there's actually ways, I'll talk about a project here in a minute, but you can use Graal VMs to build your custom runtime and deploy that as a Lambda as well. So what's a Lambda look like over in the Java world, right? So one of the first things that you'll start to hear is a term called a handler, right? Which is the entry point for your function. And Java has two interfaces that you use for interacting with your Lambda, right? You have the request handler and you have the request stream handler. The request handler is something is the interface that you would use most of the time, right? The request stream handler is if you're dealing with kind of like file stream and IO type of interaction. And you can see the example that I have here, right? We have